Hey Ed, this is the first time I'm using this district account.
Yeah.
How do I see who's in the
All right. So
crowd?
go down to participants. Don't click the arrow. Just click on the little images of the people. Do you have that?
Nope,
Down at the very bottom, you don't have participants.
nope. So maybe that's just reserved for you as the moderator. That's fine, no worries.
I can send you a list.
Yeah,
I'm new to this as well. So,
yeah, no worries. I can look at it afterwards. So just so I need to know if I need to reach out to individual people.
and if we get to a point where a question is unclear or we want some kind of, you know, elaboration on it, I can, if you like, I can change the settings so that the parent can talk.
Okay.
Some questions are not easy to put into words.
Yeah.
Let's start this in 30 seconds.
All righty.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ed. I work in central office. We know your time is precious and valuable. Thank you very much for caring enough to be here. Please, if you haven't had a lot of experience with Zoom video conferencing, it's pretty easy to use the chat function. So go down to the very bottom, the middle of your screen. You'll see a little icon that says chat. When you click on it, a thing will pop up that says type message here. Do that, hit return, and then you are in queue. And please use the chat. There's another icon over there that says Q&A. I would prefer that everybody use the chat because I can copy that and make a copy of that for the principals so that they've got a record of all the inquiries, and that'll be helpful to us down the road. So I will also record this, and I'll need to, when it's over, I'll need to get the video file to a member of our tech department so he can reduce it to fit YouTube's parameters. That's where we park them. And I should have that done before the end of the business day. We have another session this afternoon at 4:30. I won't have time to get that up on YouTube today, but I'll aim for tomorrow on that one. So let's jump right in. We have Principal Dr. Mike Dietrich and Assistant Principal Josh Flores. Mike, let's go.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning. We've definitely been very excited about this opportunity. Been working very hard, working with a lot of people throughout the district and community to come up with our MRH Middle School reentry plan. Just want to take a brief second to thank all the stakeholders. Your support, understanding during this time is appreciated. I know I've had parents calling me, emailing me. I've had a couple individual Zooms with parents just to talk through some things specific to their family situation. And I just want to reiterate that we're here to continue to have those conversations, that just because the Zoom is going to be over in 30, 45 minutes or an hour, that doesn't mean the conversation ends. I want you to continue to reach out to us. And I'm happy to take those calls, and so is Josh. So as Ed said, please use the chat feature to provide comments or ask questions. If you prefer to reach out to me via email afterwards, I can also set up just a time for us to chat on the phone or set up some individual Zoom meetings. I'm happy to do that. So to give you an idea from a district perspective that filtered down to the middle school, the process, we met regularly with administration, medical professionals. The district actually has our own district physician that we can consult with, our transportation department, curriculum instruction, food services, special education. We had student services there, and also people that support our social and emotional work here in our district. We connected with colleagues through local superintendent's cohort, specifically at the middle school. I've had a group of about 9 to 10 middle school principals that are in the area that we have consistently been bouncing plans off each other and ideas off each other as we've worked through this process. It's actually been very encouraging the way we've been able to reinvent some things and spark some really good conversation with other administrators throughout the area. And together we developed ideas and gained feedback alongside the other staff members here at MRHMS. So do want to let everybody know that they have choices in our plan. So choice number 1, and just a reminder, there is a survey out. We need you to answer that by August 10th. And if you did not receive that in any of our emails, we can get that out to you again. But option number 1 is you remain enrolled. You follow the MRH Tiers plan. Just as we go through this, just a reminder, we are starting in Tier 3, which means distance learning, and we'll go more in depth on that in a minute. Option 2 is to remain enrolled, but you'll enroll in an MRH Virtual Academy, and that is for the first semester. It is an outside online course provider that is MOCAP approved. And number 3 is you choose to unenroll from MRH, personally develop a plan for resources and instruction, or for other terms would be to homeschool your child. Please don't hear me say that I'm encouraging families to do that. I want our kids with us, but we also understand that that's an individual choice that each family needs to make. So as I said, we'll begin our year in a Tier 3 distance learning mode. And we may move from tier to tier as things change in our community, as infection rates go up or down. So what does that look like in our tiers? Tier 1 is going to be all students attend school each day with an emphasis on social distancing, disinfecting spaces, and other COVID-related safety protocols. Tier 2 is going to be a blended learning model, which half the student body attends school twice a week in cohorts based on last names, and they maintain social distancing expectations and protocols. And then a different 2 days, we'll have our other cohort in school. But again, we're starting out in Tier 3. That is full distance learning mode, in which students do not attend school in person and learn from an online platform while at home or outside of school. But this is what I know about our community and our MRH middle school staff. The entire staff is committed to improving our practice, reflecting on what's working, and enhancing all tiers of our learning plan. So what does that look like? We've been hard at work. We've got 3 blended learning coaches now in the building that we're very grateful that the board and central office has provided to us. They've been going through training and meeting with myself and central office to discuss the best strategies for blended learning. That's allowed us to create some small cohorts of teachers that are going to be learning together. We're also working on more fidelity in the use of its learning. That's something we heard loud from our parents last year because we've been in its learning for a couple of years. A lot of our teachers have personalized it in their own ways, but we still want to provide our teachers with that freedom. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we're consistent so that it is ease of use for parents and students. One of the biggest things that we're excited about is that Zoom will now be what we're using for our online meetings. This is definitely an upgrade. We heard students last year, we heard our staff say that there was a lot of inconsistency in the online platforms we were using. So we've been very excited about the district adopting Zoom. And the other thing we heard loud from parents and students was that we did not have enough opportunities for small group and individual check-ins. And that's something that we are definitely going to target regardless of what tier that we are in. So Tier 3 to start the year, our daily schedule of school will be 10 to 2:30. If you're looking at this presentation and you're like, wow, that looks, this whole presentation, that looks very similar to the high school, or I saw that at the elementary, I want you to know that the principals across the district, head principals and assistant principals, really worked in a tight, cohesive group to make sure that our plans were meaningful and also complemented each other. The daily schedule will be 10 to 2:30. This does not mean students are going to be on Zoom the entire time. There's a lot of research right now around Zoom fatigue, and we want to make sure that we avoid that. All learning will take place within the It's Learning platform. Students will engage in daily check-ins that they might be whole class, they could be small group, it could be individual. And students will engage in classes that will consist of live video conferencing, virtual independent learning, off-screen independent learning, small group video conferencing, or independent project work. Students will engage in their chosen course schedule, and classroom teachers will plan weekly assignments for students to work on. So those first couple of weeks, we do expect students to be logging in daily to all of their classes, and I'll show you what a schedule looks like here in a minute. But they may check into a class and the teacher says, hey, you know what? I need you guys for 30 to 45 minutes of synchronous learning, and we're going to be here, we're learning together and providing some direct instruction or direct feedback. With Zoom, we can also create some breakout sessions where maybe, you know, the teacher sends 4 kids to this breakout session and 3 kids to this breakout session, and then that teacher can jump from conference room to conference room and meet with students. So we're really excited about just to be able to expand what we're able to do online. So this is what a schedule is looking like to start the year. So 8:30 to 10 o'clock, we wanted to set some time aside for teachers to be able to meet with small groups, whether that's a small group that requires some additional remediation, whether that's a group that needs some social emotional meeting time, or possibly even students who need some extension in their work. That's also a time for some family communication and time for student feedback to our teachers. They'll log into their first class at 10 o'clock. Again, and then the other thing we wanted to do is make sure we were creating a nice 10-minute break in between those classes, because again, we want to combat that Zoom fatigue. We've encouraged our teachers to give students a task during that 10 minutes to say, hey, you know what, if you don't need to be sitting at your computer, we want you to get up for 10 minutes, go outside, give us look at 3 observations, and then you're going to give that to me next time we meet. And then when they check into their next class, that teacher may say, hey, you know, what did your last teacher have you do as far as a brain break during those 10 minutes? Now, we're not going to expect all students to do that because we understand that they may have to check in on younger siblings. They may have some responsibilities there at home. But I'm also going to be encouraging the staff here at school that if they're not meeting with students individually after that class period, for them to, you know, get out of the building, walk a lap, or, you know, do something just to get the body going. We do have a 50-minute lunch break. That I think kids are really going to enjoy that. One thing we consistently heard from students, even on campus, that lunch isn't long enough. But we want to make sure we give families enough time if they're using our food services to go to the ECC elementary or middle school to pick up lunches, that we're giving them enough time to do that and still enjoy their lunch. And then again, at the end of the day, there's some additional time, office hours, where they can do individuals check-ins, small group check-ins. Wednesdays, this is where we really decided to focus a lot of our work around advisory time. So students can use that Wednesday to catch up on some work, but also this is going to give us an opportunity for advisory teachers to meet with small groups of students and check in with them. So what's being successful about online learning? What's not being successful in online learning? Or do you have the resources that you need? And also part of that is providing them with a time to have some social interactions with peers that isn't academic related or applies to academic content. You know, so we may have some talking points for students on those Wednesdays so they can just have some conversation with peers. Obviously, our hope is to move from Tier 3 to Tier 2, and because you're needing to make a decision on whether you want to go with the Virtual Academy or with the MRH tiers, I wanted to make sure that you had the information what a Tier 2 snapshot looked like as well. So in that, half the student body would attend on designated days. This would give us about 115 students in the middle school per day. This allows for our classrooms to meet St. Louis County recommended spacing norms. I can tell you that I have already walked the building with some architects, and we have looked at our furniture, we've looked at our classrooms, and it's been really nice to bring in some professionals to show us the best way to arrange these classrooms so that we're appropriately distancing students and making sure that they're safe upon their return. That school day will be 8:30 to 3 o'clock. We'll have increased protocols to ensure multiple layers of protection. Middle schoolers and staff will be required to wear masks. They'll be required to do safe distancing. Traffic patterns, we just received in our arrows that are going down on the floors and on the walls, showing students the best way to travel so that we try to eliminate students running into each other. We've also had a couple of companies in looking at plexiglass barriers for interaction spaces and also reduced time in hallways. One thing that we're doing as far as reduced time in hallways, which I know kids get really excited about having lockers at the middle school, but this is some research that actually happened in Germany. So when I say we're talking to people across the community, we're also looking at research around the world. One of the things that showed to really reduce time in hallways was eliminating the use of lockers. So that is one intervention that we'll be doing. We will ask for no arrivals to school prior to 8 a.m. We will have separate middle school and high school entrances. Middle school will enter through the gym lobbies where we'll have a grab and go breakfast. High school is going to enter in through the middle school, high school cafeteria. And then the lunch and socially distanced cafe spaces. We've also had architects and other vendors in to show us the best ways of setting up that cafeteria space so that we can keep kids safe. And then blended learning with in-person instruction and its learning. So what will that look like in a week? So 8A would be cohort 1, and we're looking at students A through L. Our division of A through L and N through Z gave us a really clean break, and our variance is only about 2 students. But again, so A through L would attend on Monday. Students with the last name of M through Z would attend on Tuesday. We would keep our Wednesday the same, where we can do some social emotional check-ins, small groups, meeting with students. And then Thursday, our cohort 1 would return back to school for their B day. And then on Friday, our cohort 2 would return for their B day. And that's not to say, if they have, I'm just going to use an example, if they have Spanish on A day, cohort 1, that doesn't mean that they're not going to have Spanish to work on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, because so many of the things that students are learning at this time need repetition. So the teacher will be setting up smaller little daily things for students to complete throughout the week. So I definitely want to give everyone an idea of what the MRH Virtual Academy looks like. So this is our snapshot. We are looking at a variety of MOCAP certified programs. One of them is Schools PLP, is the one that to me has really stood out. But I want everybody to know that this is not through its learning. It is an outside provider, and it is not MRH created curriculum. I know a lot of people live here, move to here because of our curriculum. I want to be very clear that the Virtual Academy is not MRH curriculum. We are asking that families commit to learning within this platform for the entire first semester. And I'll have a more in-depth answer to that here in another slide. The enrollment process with the school team and counselors will help you choose courses within your flow of needed credits. So if a family chooses Virtual Academy, we're going to set up a time where either with myself, Mr. Flores, or our school counselor, and we're going to look at the classes they're taking, and we're going to see which ones most closely meet the needs of that class. It will be flexible learning schedule and times. It's kind of students are going to learn at their own pace. It will have regular check-ins with a designated MRH staff member for support. One thing that we're able to do in this is we'll be able to keep those students that are in Virtual Academy in our advisories so that we can continue to give them some social interaction through web conferencing on those Wednesdays. But again, it's learn at your own pace. We will have tech help available from MRH, and it'll be on pace with MRH curriculum, aligned to the Missouri grade level standards. The negatives, again, it's not an MRH curriculum. There will likely be no peers in their class, and there is also a lack of teacher-student personalized supports. So I want to go through kind of what the differences look like between spring 2020, because I think there's this mindset that what you saw in spring 2020 is going to be the same as what you're seeing in the fall of 2020. There's a big difference here. You know, we left for spring break thinking we were coming back from spring break and we were going to have students in the classroom, and we never came back. And to be honest, the entire country and places around the world kind of went into emergency mode. You know, so the teacher check-ins, some were live. A lot of things were unplanned and more reactive. Live attendance was encouraged. The schoolwork was required. We had an adjusted grading system, so the kids were not impacted disproportionately by what was happening with online learning. The learning progress feedback was minimal. I don't say that to say that parents didn't do a good job and our teachers didn't do a good job or administrators didn't do a good job. What I say is we were thrown into a situation that nobody was prepared for. And everybody, parents, educators, students, did the best they knew how to do at that time. But I think we've all learned from that. And that's why things are going to be better in fall of 2020. So what you're going to see is more live and recorded instruction. The instruction is going to be more planned and purposeful. We are going to have expectations for live attendance. The schoolwork will be required. You know, we have a grading system here at the middle school that we adopted several years ago, and we feel very good about, and we're going to be able to continue with that. We feel that the grading and feedback will be accurate and reflect learning progress. And we also feel that we'll have a better opportunity to focus on content standards and new concepts. In relation to the MRH Virtual Academy, it will be personalized and self-paced. It's planned, it's definitely flexible for families. Daily progress is expected and it'll be checked by an MRH staff member. Schoolwork will be required and the grading and feedback will accurately reflect learning progress. And there's also a focus on content standards and new concepts. So a lot of questions I've received in the last week are, what are we doing for students that require intervention, 504s, have an IEP? So I want to walk through that by tier. So in a tier 2 situation, it will be direct and in-person teaching aligned with blended learning with MRH middle school staff. The support systems aligned with the School 105, or in our case, our intervention teams. The intervention groups will be safely distanced by grade level with added layers of protection. And then consideration for face shields and clear masks provide improved staff to student interactions. You know, anytime we're having staff in front of students, obviously if we can make it some way where they can see their face, because sometimes students rely on lip reading, you know, we want to make sure that that's provided. On the tier 3 setting, all staff will use It's Learning, and that's the same for tier 2. It will be a mix of synchronous learning and asynchronous learning. Those are new terms for you. Basically, synchronous being online or distance learning with real-time interaction, or asynchronous meaning occurs online without real-time instruction. And there will be a mix of that. There will be learning blocks to allow for small whole group and individualized learning. Students with IEPs will receive services according to a distance learning plan. So every student with a IEP will have a distance learning plan written for them, and it'll be developed by their case manager. So if your child has an IEP, that case manager is going to be reaching out to you and letting you know what those plans look like and getting some input from you. And then special education staff will continue to maintain regular office hours, the same as our gen ed teachers, between that 8:30 and 10 time and 2:30 and 3:15. What does that look like for our MRH Virtual Academy? Students who receive special education and related services will have modified supports in place for their learning progressions as outlined in a distance learning plan. And this will continue to be reviewed periodically and shared with families via their IEP representative. Special education staff will maintain regular office hours for questions, concerns, and support, same as our MRH teachers. And assigned MRH teachers will be checking in with students as a support resource and check-in system. So even if a student has an IEP or 504 and they're learning in the virtual academy, we still want to welcome them into our conversations on those Wednesdays. Again, we heard from parents and students that our spring did not have a lot of social and emotional supports for our students. So we wanted to make sure that we did some intentional planning around this. You've heard me mention those Wednesdays. I'm going to keep mentioning them because I know the same way our students were craving that interaction, so is our staff, and they're very excited and eager for those. But in a tier 2 such situation, it's intentional planning for class meetings. There's increased opportunities for movement in designated locations in the building. There's a continuance of school traditions in a safe virtual format. One of the questions I continue to get is, what does it look like for us to continue groups or extracurricular activities? And we'll basically, we're going to continue to follow St. Louis County protocols. And anytime we do have a club or activity, we're going to be having the teacher or sponsor of that activity write a safe plan for hosting that activity. In the tier 3, there'll be a continuance of the school clubs, again, but it's going to be in a safe format. So, you know, for example, one that we could probably reasonably do fairly well and do online would be our Dungeons and Dragons Club. That's one that we feel pretty confident that could continue day 1. Others where there's more interaction face-to-face may be more difficult, but we're up to the challenge. And counselors will be available each day. And that really goes for tier 2, tier 3, and our MRH Virtual Academy, but our counselor is going to be there and ready to help where needed. So what does that look like for social emotional supports in the Virtual Academy? Again, we're going to welcome our students to those Wednesday check-ins. We'll have phone call or video conferencing check-ins with the teachers, counselor, or administration if needed. And across the board, we'll also have Youth in Need, which is a counseling program that we have in the building, but it's also going to be able to extend out into the community for students in the MRH Virtual Academy. So, and then finally getting to our last option, if you choose not to participate in the MRH Tier 3 or the virtual learning option, you know, I'm not a big fan of this term, but it's a non-MRH student or homeschool. But students and families would no longer receive MRH services. Students who have an IEP would be referred to SNAP services, which is our special non-public access program. And they have, you know, qualified special school district teachers that would then take over that caseload and be able to provide services for your child. Families can still take advantage of the food distribution services. We feel that's very important to our community. And we'll continue to send periodic emails to stay connected to families. In fact, Mr. Flores and I have talked about this, and it should say we will leave all parents. But we're going to leave all parents on our building emails unless they ask to be removed, because a lot of what we're going to be communicating is just what's happening in and around the community, and we want to make sure we're keeping people informed. So if you do choose the non-MRH school or the third option, that does not mean we're going to stop communicating with you. So the big question I know that we've received across multiple buildings is, do parents have to choose now? If we don't choose all virtual but don't want to come back later, what happens? Unfortunately, this is a really hard one to talk about, but a lot of, you know, MOCAP requires us to have students registered to take those classes, or the vendors that are using or that are MOCAP certified or approved. So we really need to have those students in there because we can't enroll them after a specific date. And once we finish our enrollment, we can't add students to that. So that's the reason why we need why we need parents to really make that decision now. And we want them to look at this as it's not a decision for right now. It's really a decision or a commitment that we need you to make for a semester. Another question I continue to get is, what can we do as parents? And I know this is sometimes easier said than done, but I always use the analogy of, make sure you're self-care and you're putting on your oxygen mask before you're putting the oxygen mask on, your kid next to you, because we really need you. Sometimes you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself. So really we want you to think about that self-care. So how do you help your students? We talked about this last year. We want you to set up a dedicated workspace for students. We know that sometimes, given living situations, sometimes that can be difficult, but we also want you to give them voice on what that setting can be where they feel they can learn best. Discuss the what ifs, so if, regardless whether you're option 1, 2, or 3, and you're using some type of online format, ask them questions like, hey, what are you going to do if you can't log on? What are you going to do if your Wi-Fi isn't working? Or what are you going to do if you need help with an assignment? And work through those things prior to. Make sure you're having open daily dialogue. Ask them what's going well. What are you struggling with? My favorite is asking, what did you learn today? And, I think one of the most favorite middle school answers is, nothing, or I don't know. I can assure you there's going to be a lot of learning taking place. And which kind of leads to my last bullet point, but in between that is we would encourage physical activity during breaks in the day. But also we want your child to share their username and passwords to It's Learning, so you can get on there with them and have conversations about what they're learning. And also make sure you have your parent PowerSchool account. And one thing that we've been working on is requesting some videos so that they can walk parents through what does PowerSchool look like? Because we know that's new for our 7th grade families. How can you best use It's Learning, not just on the mobile app, but also on a desktop, because it looks a little different depending on which one you're using. So expect a video library as we're beginning the year. So that's what I have now. I haven't even had an opportunity to look at the chat yet, but just a reminder, if I don't get to your question during this, I've got the name and the question here. I'm going to get back with you. If you get out of this Zoom call and you're like, man, I wish I would have asked this, again, reach out to me. I'll set up a phone call, a Zoom, or I can answer by email. You just let me know how you want to communicate. I think we're small enough, we can be personalized, and I'm happy to talk. So,
Dr.
Ed, you want to help me with questions?
I'm happy to run through the chat if you want me to start with that.
Sure.
All right. And by the way, I failed to mention at the outset that this Zoom account that we're using for the meeting we're on right now needs to be transitioned over to the next webinar for Early Childhood Center families at 11. So we've got a good 20, 22 minutes here. We'll be fine. So the first parent question is, it's two-pronged, and I can actually take the first question because I think I picked up part of the answer in a phone call. She writes, will there be modifications to the HVAC system? So when I saw that question, I called Mr. Mike Wieland, who among his many duties he's pretty much in charge of environmental controls. And he says that over the past 2 weeks, actually 3 weeks, one of our contractors went through all the buildings and either cleaned or replaced all the filters on the intake systems. And he said everything was inspected and everything seems to be drawing perfectly well. So that's about as far as I can go. I don't know if there were other concerns with the HVAC system, but that's the response I got. The other part of the question is, how will teachers be available during that 8:30 to 10 and the 2:30 to 3:15 p.m. time slot? In other words, is that like a drop-in Zoom meeting?
Yeah, so that may vary. If we're moving throughout the week and we see there's a couple students struggling with math or science or something, the teacher has discretion to schedule some meetings with those students and say, hey, you know what, I need to see you at 2:15 or 2:30 and let's schedule a time so we can go over this content. Teachers may, send an email or have it on It's Learning and say, hey, I'm going to be available during this time if you need to drop in. I'm going to have an open Zoom. And based on that, they may drop kids into, if they have 2 or 3 students come into that, they may set up and send kids out to breakout sessions depending on what their questions are, right? So then they can float back and forth between rooms in Zoom and help individual students. Our counselors will be available. I know one thing I didn't mention is, some of those times on Wednesdays are going to be for the advisories, and Mr. Flores and I are working on a plan where we're splitting up and joining advisories on Wednesdays so that they also have a communication with us, because we're typically used to seeing them in the hallways, during every passing period. And I'm sure I speak for Mr. Flores and I both that we miss that interaction. I really miss seeing those students. So to answer your question, that can look very, very different depending on what the needs are of the students and the needs that the teachers need to deliver curriculum or check in with students for social emotional needs. So Ed, you may grab the next one. So will the Virtual Academy students be issued a Chromebook? Absolutely. In the choices that you have, in the first choice that you would make, if it's in a tier or a reentry plan, the students obviously are going to have a Chromebook. In the Virtual Academy, because they're still a MRH student and they're still on our enrollment, they would maintain that Chromebook as well. Where they would not have access to the Chromebook is if they went with that third option where they're being homeschooled and they're not an official student of MRH, then we would not be providing a Chromebook. I have a question for a 7th grader. What does day 1 look like? So we're actually working on an email to them right now. I think one of the most important things, so typically if we were starting a school year, they would be coming into a town hall and I would be getting up and talking, and 8th grade cheers as they walk in. And unfortunately, we're going to miss out on that opportunity this year. But the first part of that day is going to be a webinar with me, where I'm just going to kind of outline some expectations of what I want to see in Zoom learning. And I'll be doing that for 7th graders and 8th graders. Looks like we're going to schedule that around 9:30 so that they can then just log right out, get into It's Learning, and go straight to their first class. Will virtual learning still be able to join clubs? So if I'm reading that right, if a student is in the virtual learning option, can they still be able to join clubs? They are still considered an MRH student, and I don't see why that would keep them from doing that. We have a question. Can MRH commit to not going to Tier 1 for the first semester? What I can tell you based on what I've seen is our board is continuing to look at multiple metrics as far as when we move from tier to tier, but I have not heard any conversation as far as an unwillingness to eventually go to Tier 1. I think that this is weighing very heavy on our board. It's weighing very heavy on our administrators and teachers, but I have not heard discussion as far as no commitment to going to Tier 1. I don't know if that's something, Ed, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I'm also looking ahead to the next question. In the tiered plan, what are the exact metrics and thresholds for changing tiers? They don't exist. Late last week, actually exactly a week ago, I was privy to an email from a gentleman who is associated with the Regional Superintendents Group, and in it he said that they felt like they were close, was the term he used, to coming up with some kind of parameters for defining what the tiers are. But offered no details. I think we all know that it's a complex amalgam of input from the Professional School Nurses Association, the State Athletic Regulatory Agency, Department of Elementary, Secondary Education, the county, the state health departments. All I can say right now is that the board has this as job one. There is a work session tonight, and it's not expressly on the agenda, but the tier movement always seems to arise in these meetings. So it might be a great idea for everybody on this call to drop in at the 6:30 work session tonight and listen in. Again, I'm not saying that they're going to take any action on the tiers, but there's a lot of movement on putting some shape and some definition on what the metrics should be. It may not be that visible, but it's happening, I can promise you. But we just don't have any right now. We have one parent asking if MRH goes to tier 1, would the classes be available via Zoom?
No, so one of the issues that we have is, obviously MRH only has so much staff. So when we have students or teachers dedicated to tier 3 and we move to a tier 2, so that's really difficult because we're increasing their workload. So we could potentially have them doing, one person doing 2 different jobs. We have talked about, so I guess I would encourage, if that's something that you're worried about us going back to tier 1, reach out to me. We can talk about, what that virtual academy looks like and what transitions could potentially look like. If a student has to actually quarantine is another question. Obviously, that's a case where we're going to want to sit down and work with the family, right? Because that's, especially if it's a documented case where they had possible exposure or they're infected. Those are different scenarios that we're going to need to work through on a case-by-case basis. So Josh, I haven't really given you an opportunity to talk. I'm sorry. Mr. Flores, did you want to add anything? Because I keep saying Josh does this and Josh does this, but I really haven't given you a time to talk. So my apologies, sir.
No, no worries. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's on the call. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. Kind of the points that Mr. Dietrich reiterated at the beginning of this. We're really excited for the school year. We know it's going to look very different and it's going to be a challenge, but we're all going to be able to work through this together. So without you guys asking these questions, without kind of the input from you guys, it's a little bit more difficult for us to do our job. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us, reach out to us, and also add them to the chat, as I think we've got about 10 minutes or so left.
And again, if you don't feel comfortable asking it in the chat, or you asked the question and I didn't go in depth enough for you, my email's on the screen, reach out to me. And I'll tell you, my preference is I've really been enjoying to Zoom with parents, because especially our 7th grade parents, because I don't know them yet, and I want to be able to put faces with names. So please do that. We had a parent reach in and say, thank you so much for everything all of you are doing for MRH. And again, I'd go back to I think it was my 2nd slide. I just want to say thanks to the stakeholders for just being so supportive through all this. I think I speak for a lot of the principals and assistant principals across the district. The outreach of positive emails we've been receiving has really been uplifting, because I compare this decision. I was joking the other day, like I used to say the hardest decision in education was making a snow day call, right? And Ed probably laughs about that because he's the guy that gets to make the phone call. But this is like a snow day call times 100. And
we got another one here, Mike. Will there be plans on how students can socialize, like a teen version of an adult Zoom happy hour?
Hold up. Sorry, I was looking at the one above it. So will there be plans on how students can socialize teen version? So yeah, that is the goal for those Wednesdays, so that we can get small group students together and talk about non-academic things. It'll still be targeted as far as getting kids to talk, but it won't necessarily be academic related. So we do definitely have plans to provide opportunities for kids to socialize. And then the other aspect of that is, what does it look like to provide opportunities for our clubs to meet online? And, you know, we haven't worked out all those clubs yet. That's something where I need to meet with each additional club sponsor and get their ideas on, you know, how do we make sure that that club is viable for tier 2, tier 3. We had a question about where can we find more information on Virtual Academy. I would encourage you to go online and look at MoCap. There's a lot of options out there, you know, but what I would encourage you to do, if that's something that you're really considering, give me a call. I'm happy to talk a little bit more through the options. But what we're going to do is we're going to sit down with you and we're going to look at our courses. So some of them are pretty easy to match up. If a student's taking communication arts grade 7, pretty easy to match up. Grade 7 math, pretty easy to match up. High school algebra, pretty easy to match up. It's when we start getting into opportunities like band, right? You know, an online option is not going to provide one-on-one instruction for band. So typically what I've been seeing is more like music history. So that's something that, you know, we can work through. Sorry for the silence. I'm reading questions while we're going. So what happens if a family unenrolls and wants to re-enroll mid-semester? Will they also not have an all virtual option choice? You know what, that's not a question that I have heard, but I can see your name here and I can definitely find that information for you, because that's not a situation that I've played through in my mind yet. So question is, do you know when schedules will be finalized and sent out if there were changes? So our counselor has been we had quite a few schedule changes requested, and I know that our counselor has been working on those. I would encourage you to log into PowerSchool and take a look at those if it has not been updated yet. Make sure that you filled out that form. I can resend that in an email. Sorry, I'm making a note here. I can send that out to families, that schedule change form. If your child is wanting to take a different class, that is something that we would need pretty soon so that we can get that. But check on PowerSchool if it's not already updated. Shoot me an email and I can check into that for you. Or I have your name, I can just check here when we get off the Zoom call. And you have, okay. So I'm curious, is there anybody at home that's sitting there and their students are with them? Oh, awesome. Quite a few. Well, tell those students I said hello. We had another comment just thanking us for our time and thought into this process. We're looking forward to this weird entrance in the middle school. I would argue that, you know, I actually just did my defense last Friday, and one of the sentences in my dissertation was, a lot of people think of middle school as just weird anyway. And so it's published now, but
It looks to me like you did a thorough job because we have no more lingering questions.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind again, just if you get off this call and you have questions, you can join us at our 4:30 call, or you can email me individually, and I'm happy to meet with you. Okay. But thank you everyone for coming today. And I definitely look forward to this weird entrance into the 2021 academic year. Feel free to reach out to me or Mr. Flores, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.